A pivot table in Excel is a very useful tool which allows you to easily give a meaning to large collections of data. Through a pivot table, you can perform data analysis, summarize the totals, and present summary reports. Imagine we have a list of hundreds of students enrolled in a faculty of engineering. We know their names, we know which course they're enrolled in, but we have no way using this list of easily determining how many are the first-year students or the students who come from Milan. It is certainly possible to perform filtering, countif and countifs, but by using a pivot table, the problem would be immediately solved. With the pivot table, it is very simple to summarize data by categories and subcategories, view totals and subtotals, and expand and compress various levels of data. You can also perform a simple double-click to immediately view the items that contribute to a certain total or subtotal. Furthermore, it is possible to turn the table instantly by changing the values assigned in the rows and columns. For this reason, it is called pivot. To create a pivot table, first of all, we must start from a sheet containing data. The data must be correctly sorted, and each column must have a significant header. This is essential because the column headings will turn into the fields of the pivot table, so it is important that they are understandable. It can be useful to format them in the table using the appropriate Format as Table option from the Styles group of the Home tab. In doing so, if you insert later rows or columns, these will be immediately considered as part of the table. Once you have identified the source data table, you can select it, go to the Insert tab and choose Pivot Table. At this point, you can verify that the selected table or range is the correct one. Alternatively, you can correct it or indicate an external data source. From the same window, you can also decide whether the pivot table should be inserted in a new worksheet or on the existing one. Although in some circumstances it may be convenient to keep the data source and the pivot table on the same sheet, it is advisable to put the table on a separate sheet for more order and more workspace. At this point, the table will be created. The empty pivot table will appear on the left and a menu called Pivot Table Fields will show on the right. This menu is fundamental because it enables the organization of the table. In the upper part can be found the fields of the pivot table, which correspond to the column headings in the starting table. In the half below, there are 4 areas: filters, columns, rows, and values. The pivot table is constructed by dragging the fields into the 4 areas as needed. It is possible to drag more than one field into an area. The data in the rows field will be displayed in the rows going downwards. The data in the columns field will be inserted in the columns going to the right. The data in the filters area will be filtered according to a menu that will appear at the top of the pivot table. The data in the values area are those on which operations will be performed, such as a count or a sum. This is the most important area as it serves to determine the values that will be the subject of the operations in the table. Changes made in these areas immediately affect the appearance and functionality of the pivot table being created. So the first question is, what are the values on which the operations, for example, counting, adding, multiplying, must be performed? In our example, we first wish to obtain the total of the students of our Faculty of Engineering. Therefore, in the Values area, we will drag a field that we are sure is found in each of the rows of the table of origin, such as the surname or the ID number. By dragging the surname, Excel will automatically provide us with the count of how many rows contain a surname, and therefore the total number of students. In this way, we have instantly retrieved the required information. We now want to know how many students are enrolled in the individual departments. To do this, simply drag the Departments field into the Rows area. We will immediately get a count of the students in each of the departments. We now want to know how the students are divided into the various years of the course. To achieve this, simply drag the Course Year field into columns. A table will appear from which you can immediately tell how many students are in each year, in addition to the totals per year and department. If we want to know how many students are in Course A in the various years, we can drag the Course field to the Filters area, and from the filter that has now appeared at the top, select Course A. At this point, we will have the totals of the individual classes. If we wanted to know the full identity of the students, for example, in first year Course A of the Department of Civil Engineering, we merely need to perform a so-called drop-down. That is, a double-click on the number 142. A new sheet will appear containing the student data thus filtered. As seen, fields can be added with a simple drag and drop, and they can be removed in the same way. Just click with the mouse on a field inserted in an area and drag it out. You can also use the check mark next to each field to add or remove it, or you can right-click to bring up a menu of options, including the one to delete the field. When inserting a field into the value area, if the field contains numerical values, Excel by default uses the sum function. If, on the other hand, a field containing non-numerical values is positioned in the value area, the counting function is applied by default. In our example, if we dragged the ID numbers into the value field, Excel would perform a sum, which is useless to us. It is possible to change the function applied. Simply click on the down arrow to the right of the field label and choose Value Field Settings. From here, you can select Count from the various options available. Once again, from the Value Field Settings window, you can choose the Show Values As menu, which allows you to indicate the data on the table as a percentage. In this way, for example, we will know how many students are enrolled in a given course as a percentage of the total. If desired, we can drag the same field twice to the value area, in order to show it once as a simple sum and once as a percentage of the total. As seen, the Pivot Table Fields box is fundamental for the configuration of the table. If it is closed through the X on the right, it will be possible to restore it through the button Field List on the contextual tab Analyze Pivot Table. When you click on the pivot table, two contextual tabs, Pivot Table Analyze and Design, appear. The latter allows you to modify the styles of the table, to make changes to the layout, and provide a selection of predefined styles.